Are you a Christian? Are you somebody who knows Jesus as your King? Does he have authority over your life? Have you bowed the knee to him? Are you somebody who knows him closely? You know his presence as well as his power? Well, if you're a Christian, if you're somebody who's given your life to him and known his life poured into you, well, then you're somebody who's supposed to go international. You're supposed to cross borders. You're supposed to be somebody who has an ambition, together with the rest of the church, to take this joy globally, to take the blessings that you have and share them with the person next door, with the country next door, with the languages next door, with the world next door. But how do we do that? And is that a job for all of us? And what kind of place do I have? I mean, some of us can't literally up sticks and move next door. I mean, to a country next door or to a land far away. Maybe we've got family ties that tie us down here in a good way. You know, we've got people that we need to look after and people who rely on us, and so we can't just up sticks and move. Or maybe you're still being educated, you're still in school or university, or maybe your body isn't what it used to be, and you're tied to living here, so you can't move. And does that mean you can't play a part in this? No, let me tell you a story. Okay, this is the story of a guy called Derek Matungu. He was a student a couple of decades ago. He was a student in Bath. Came over, studied at the Technical College there, and then later went on to London and studied at Imperial College in London. And while he was here, he wasn't a Christian before he came, but while he was here, a few Christians befriended him. And then a family from a local church took him in and gave him a few dinners, kind of became good friends with him. And over time, he became a Christian himself. Derek gave his life to Jesus. He knew God's power and his presence in his life. And eventually he went back to Zambia. He went back and was so impressed by all the stuff that he'd seen among university students, among churches here, that he wanted to start a Christian group in his university back in Zambia. So he did. And he eventually, after he graduated, became one of the first Christian student workers in Zambia. And before long, about 1 in 10, a tenth of all the students in Zambia had become Christians. The gospel, the good news of Jesus, in his power, in his presence, to love us and forgive us, people had become Christians. They'd known that power and that presence, and it was turning the country upside down. So one day the president got hold of Derek, invited him to come to the palace with the local student leaders, and said to him, "What is this message you're preaching which is turning the university upside down?" So little Kenneth, who'd been in the home of some family, we don't know their names, who'd been befriended by some who knows who students, he had been invited into the palace of the president and asked to share the gospel. And so Derek told him, this is how it goes in this book. Kenneth Coander, the president, was moved to tears when he heard the good news of Jesus. "This," he said, "is the message our culture needs to hear. Come back in 2 weeks and bring the other student leaders with you." Derek and the leaders of the Christian Union returned 2 weeks later to the presidential palace to meet the entire Zambian cabinet. "Now," said Dr. Coander, the president, "preach to them what you preached to me." And so they did. So the writer of this book concludes, through the kindness shown in Bath to one student far away from home, God was sovereignly establishing a Christian witness among students in another country, and through those students, the gospel message would be preached to their government. That's a pretty cool story, isn't it? Those Christians who befriended Derek, that family that took him in for a few dinners, they didn't, as far as we know, up sticks and move to another country, but God used them to send ripples, shockwaves of good news to countries far, far away from their homeland. So if you can't leave, if you can't move, it doesn't mean you can't be involved. It just means that you start here. You start where you are. You share that good news with the people next door. You speak about Jesus to the people in your family, to the people around you, to the international students or the people from other countries who are in our midst, who are around us. Share the good news wherever we are. There's other things that we can do as well. If you're here and you're not able to up sticks and move, the other obvious thing you can do is pray. I mean, if Jesus really is the authority, the one who's over absolutely everything, and if you can speak to him and ask him for things in prayer, well then, isn't that the most powerful thing you could do? Isn't that the most powerful thing you could do? To speak to him and say, "Lord, would you do something in this country? Would you help that person who's working over there? Would you move and show people your power Bring people your presence, that they would know your salvation, that they would walk in your ways. That's something that the people in Psalm 67 were singing about. Do you remember? They were saying, may God be gracious and bless us. Make his face shine upon us. That's verse 1. So that your ways may be known on the earth, your salvation among all peoples. They're praying for it. They're working for it. They're asking God to make it happen. That his salvation, his power would be known, and his ways would be known as well. But you can go, you can pray, you can share the good news with the people around you. There's other things you could do as well. You could give. I mean, it costs money to go abroad, to set up life over there, to give yourself to sharing the good news with others. So we could give. If you don't have much money, well, you could probably afford a stamp and a postcard. And if you're part of our church, then there's a good number of missionaries who work abroad, who would really be encouraged by you sending them a little postcard of encouragement or a little packet of Cadbury's Dairy Milk, and sending them a little encouragement to say, hey, we're thinking of you, we're praying for you, we've got your back. So let's do that, even if we can barely move from our front rooms. Maybe you've been stuck at home for the best part of the last couple of years. Well, there's still plenty that you can do to be right in the centre of God's work in the world. Those people who befriended Derek Matungu, the ripples of the gospel that they put into his life, well, those ripples went all the way out to Zambia. I wonder if they could ever imagine what kind of effects their kindness to him would have been like. So who's around you? Who could you be sharing kindness and goodness with? I wonder where those ripples would go. But maybe that's not your issue. Maybe you kind of would quite like to go, but you feel like you just don't really have the gifts for it, or you just aren't smart enough, or maybe you feel a bit too old. Like, how could I learn a language now and go abroad? Because this passage should cause each one of us to think seriously about whether we should go. Not all of us can go, not all of us must go. We've all got to be involved in it, but all of us, I think, should be considering whether we should go or not. Whether we should physically up sticks and count the cost and take the risk and move abroad. Well, can I give you another story? It's a story of a woman called Gladys Aylward. You can see her, sort of her story. It's kind of Hollywoodized, but depicted in a film called The Inn of the Sixth Happiness. I'm not sure where you could find it, but you could Google it. The Inn of the Sixth Happiness, and watch a kind of Hollywoodized version of her story with Ingrid Bergman as the lead actress, filmed in North Wales. It's a pretty good film. But anyway, Gladys Aylward, you can Wikipedia her and kind of get the true story. But she was a young woman who didn't have many job prospects. She was kind of working in service in the 1930s, 1940s, around then. And she didn't have much money, didn't have much education. In fact, when she joined a mission organization trying to get to China, she failed the exams, tried really hard to learn Chinese, and failed, couldn't do it. And so they wrote her off. They basically said, sorry, Gladys, love, you're not cut out for this. And they stopped her funding, kicked her out of the mission, and said, this isn't for you. But she wouldn't be deterred. She went on, got herself some more training, and eventually saved up enough money for a train ticket from London to China. Bought a ticket, literally, on the Trans-Siberian Railway, and got on the train at Liverpool Street Station, and took the train across the world, and ended up eventually in China. It was a pretty epic journey. You can go and read about it later if you want. But she ended up meeting up with a missionary called Jeannie Lawson, who died about a year after Gladys arrived, and she ended up starting an amazing work. Just a humble servant woman with not much money or stuff, not much education or training, a bit too old to learn Chinese, so they thought. She ended up starting an amazing work. An amazing work in an inn that used to take in men who were a bit like the long-distance truckers of their day. They would take pack mules across the mountains in China. So they took them into the inn, shared the gospel through stories with them, day by day, night by night, and then these truckers, mule runners, would take the stories on with them. That was the idea, to share the good news with these people who were going to be traveling around East Asia anyway. And they, well, who knows where they'd end up with the seeds of the gospel in their hearts, bringing other seeds to who knows who, taking the blessing they'd received from Gladys and Jeannie and the people who worked there and taking them out to others. Her story is just amazing, of a humble woman who everybody thought wasn't cut out for it, but ended up having an amazing effect, doing really wonderful things in China. Go and look her up, Gladys Aylward. There's loads more to her story that I can't get into right now. But this is such good news, isn't it? It's good news not just for me, it's good news for the world. And good news that all of us can be involved, whether through praying, through giving, through sending others and sending encouragement to others, or whether through really seriously considering whether we should go ourselves. I wonder if that's something that you'll pray about and pray for in the next few weeks. Well, can I give you one last encouragement as we go? One last encouragement is that this is the path that Jesus has trodden. He doesn't just stand there saying, I'm the king, so you should go. No, he comes with us. And not only by his Spirit in his presence, but do you see? He's the one who left his home to come to us and rescue us. He's the one who left the comfort of heaven to come down and help us to know God, to bring us to him. He's the one who left it all behind, who took great risk, who even went to give up his own life so that we could know his salvation, so that we could walk in his ways. That's the path that Jesus walked, leaving everything behind, taking great risk to himself, but doing it all for the glory of his Father. So what's your life ambition? Will your life ambition be like Jesus's? That's his ambition, was to bring joy to the world, to help the world sing, not just a few people, but people from every tribe, every language, every nation. People from every single corner of the world that belongs to him. He wants to give them the joy of turning and saying, we belong to you. Lord Jesus, we are yours and you are ours. I wonder if that's something that you say today. I wonder if you're somebody who counts Jesus as your Lord, as the one who's your King, who knows Jesus' presence as the one who's close to you by his Spirit. If that's not you, well, maybe today would be the day where you come to Jesus and say, Lord, you have all authority. I really want your presence and your closeness in my life. Would you help me to walk with you? Would you help me to leave behind all that I have been and used to be and start a new journey, a new adventure? Give me new ambitions. Would you help me to know joy and pour it out to others? Maybe today is the first time you could pray a prayer like that. Maybe you've prayed that prayer every day for years. Well, then let's make it our ambition. If you're a Christian, if you're a part of Ammanford Evangelical Church, if you're a part of the worldwide church, well, really, this is your future. This is your greatest task. This is our great commission, to make much of God's glory, to make him the passion of our lives, and to share that passion, to share that glory, to share that joy with the whole of the world. It's an amazing ambition, isn't it? It's almost too big for us to get our minds around. It's almost too crazy to think that little people like us from a small town in West Wales could have any kind of effect on the future of the globe. But Jesus stands in our presence today and says, come on, I want you to be a part of it. All authority has been given to me, and I'm giving it to you. I'll be with you as you go. My power, my presence, my blessing. So come on, let's go and share it with the world.